Chapter 8, The Deathday Party. October arrived, spreading a damp chill over the grounds and into the castle. Raindrops the size of bullets thundered onto the castle windows for days on end. The lake rose, the flower beds turned into muddy streams, and Hagrid's pumpkins swelled to the size of garden sheds. Oliver Wood's enthusiasm for regular training sessions, however, was not dampened, which was why Harry was to be found late one stormy Saturday afternoon, a few days before Halloween, returning to Gryffindor Tower, drenched to the skin and splattered with mud. Even aside from the rain and wind, it hadn't been a happy practice session. Fred and George, who had been spying on the Slytherin team, had seen for themselves the speed of those new Nimbus 2001s. They reported the Slytherin team was no more than 7 greenish blurs, shooting through the air like missiles. As Harry squelched along the deserted corridor, he came across somebody who looked just as preoccupied as he was. Nearly headless Nick, the ghost of Gryffindor Tower, was staring morosely out of a window and muttering under his breath. "Don't fulfill their requirements. Half an inch, if that." "Hello, Nick," said Harry. Hello, said nearly headless Nick. "You look troubled, young Potter," said Nick, folding a transparent letter as he spoke, tucking it inside his coat. "So do you," said Harry. Said nearly headless Nick. "You would think, wouldn't you," he rubbed suddenly, pulling the letter back out of his pocket, "that getting hit 45 times in the neck with a blunt axe would qualify you to join the Headless Hunt?" "Oh, yes," said Harry, who was obviously supposed to agree. "I mean, nobody wishes more than I do that it had all been quick and clean, but my head had come off properly, I mean. It would have saved me a great deal of pain and ridicule. However," nearly headless Nick shook his letter open and read furiously, "we can only accept huntsmen whose heads have parted company with their bodies. You will appreciate that it would be impossible otherwise for members to participate in hunt activities such as horseback head juggling and head polo. It is with greatest regret, therefore, that I must inform you that you do not fulfill our requirements. With very best wishes, Sir Patrick Delaney Podmore." Fuming, nearly headless Nick stuffed the letter away. "Half an inch of skin and sinew hold my neck on, Harry. Most people would think that's good and beheaded, but oh no, it's not enough for Sir properly decapitated Podmore." Nearly headless Nick took several deep breaths, and then said in a far calmer tone, "So, what's bothering you? Anything I can do?" "No," said Harry, "unless you know where we can get 7 free Nimbus 2001s for our match against The rest of Harry's sentence was drowned out by a high-pitched mewing from somewhere near his ankles. He looked down and found himself gazing into a pair of lamp-like yellow eyes. It was Mrs. Norris, the skeletal gray cat who was used by the caretaker, Argus Filch, as a sort of deputy in his endless battle against students. "You better get out of here, Harry," said Nick. "Filch isn't in a good mood. He's got the flu, and some third-years accidentally plastered frog brains all over the ceiling in Dungeon 5. He's been cleaning all morning, and if he sees you dripping mud all over the place—" "Right," said Harry, backing away, but not quickly enough. Drawn to the spot by the mysterious power that seemed to connect him with this foul cat, Mr. Filch burst suddenly into a tapestry to Harry's right, wheezing and looking wildly about for the rule breaker. "Filth!" he shouted. "Mess and muck everywhere! I've had enough of it, I tell you! Follow me, Potter!" So Harry waved a gloomy goodbye to nearly headless Nick and followed Filch back upstairs, doubling the number of muddy footprints on the floor. Harry had never been inside Filch's office before. It was a place most students avoided. The room was dingy and windowless, lit by a single oil lamp dangling from the low ceiling. A faint smell of fried fish lingered about the place. Wooden filing cabinets stood around the walls. From their labels, Larry could see that they contained details of every pupil Filch had ever punished. Fred and George Weasley had an entire drawer to themselves. A high-polished collection of chains and manacles hung on the wall behind Filch's desk. It was common knowledge that he was always begging Dumbledore to let him suspend students by their ankles from the ceiling. Filch grabbed a quill from a pot on his desk and began shuffling around looking for parchment. He retrieved a large roll of parchment from his desk drawer and stretched it out in front of him, dipping his long black quill into the ink pot. "Name, Harry Potter. Crime—" "It was only a bit of mud," said Harry. "It's only a bit of mud to you, boy, but to me it's an extra hour scrubbing," shouted Filch. "Crime, befouling the castle," suggested Sentence. Dabbing at his nose, Filch squinted unpleasantly at Harry, who was waited with bated breath for his sentence to fall. But as Filch lowered his quill, there was a great bang on the ceiling of the office, which made the oil lamp rattle. "Peeves!" Filch roared, flinging down his quill in a transport of rage. "I'll have you this time! I'll have you!" And without a backwards glance at Harry, Filch ran flat-footed from the office, Mrs. Norris streaking alongside him. Peeves was a school poltergeist, a grinning, airborne menace who lived to cause havoc and distress. Harry didn't much like Peeves, but couldn't help feeling grateful for his timing. Hopefully when Peeves was done, it would distract Filch from Harry. Thinking he should probably wait for Filch to come back, Harry sank into a chair next to the desk. There was only one thing on it from his half-completed form, a large, glossy purple envelope with silver lettering on the front. With a quick glance at the door to check that Filch wasn't on his way back, Harry picked up the envelope and read, "Quick Spell, a correspondence course in beginner's magic." Intrigued, Harry flicked the envelope open and pulled out the sheet of parchment inside. More curly silver writing on the front page. Fascinated, Harry thumbed through the rest of the envelope's contents. Why on earth did Filch want a quick spell course? Did this mean he wasn't a proper wizard? Harry was just reading Lesson 1, Holding Your Wand, when he heard Filch coming back. Stuffing the parchment back into the envelope, Harry threw it back onto the desk just as the door opened. Filch was looking triumphant. That vanishing cabinet was extremely valuable, he was saying gleefully to Mrs. Norris. We'll have peas out this time, my sweet. His eyes fell on Harry. Filch's pasty face turned brick red. Harry braced himself for a tidal wave of fury. Filch hobbled across his desk, snatched up the envelope, and threw it in a drawer. Did you read? No, said Harry, lied quickly. Filch's knobbly hands were twisted together. If I thought you'd read my private, now that is mine. For a friend, be that as may. However, Harry was staring at him, alarmed. Filch had never looked madder. His eyes were popping, a tick was going in one of his pouchy cheeks, and the tartan scarf didn't help. Very well, go, and don't mend a word, not that. However, if you didn't read, go now. I have to write up Peeves' report. Go! Amazed at his luck, Harry sped out of the office, up to the corridor, and back upstairs, to escape from Filch's office without punishment. Harry, did it work? Nearly Headless Nick came gliding out of a classroom. Behind him, Harry could see the wreckage of a large black and gold cabinet that appeared to have dropped from a great height. I persuaded Peeves to crash it right over Filch's office. Thought it might distract him. Was that you? Said Harry. Yeah, it worked. I didn't even get detention. Thanks, Nick. They set off the corridor together. Nearly Headless Nick, Harry noticed, was still holding Sir Patrick's letter. I wish there was something I could do for you about the headless hunt, said Harry. Nearly Headless Nick stopped in his tracks, and Harry walked right through him. But there is something you could do for me, said Nick. Harry, would I be asking too much? You wouldn't want. What is it? Said Harry. Well, this Halloween will be my 500th death day, said Nearly Headless Nick. Oh, said Harry. Right. I'm holding a party down in one of the roomier dungeons. Friends will be coming from all over the country. It would be such an honor if you would attend. Mr. Weasley and Mrs. Granger would be most welcome too, of course. But I dare say you'd rather go to the school feast. No, said Harry. Okay. My dear boy, Harry Potter at my death day party. And do you think you could possibly mention to Sir Patrick how very frightened and impressive you find me? Of course, said Harry. Nearly Headless Nick beamed at him. A death day party, said Hermione. I bet there aren't many living people who can say they've been to one of those. It'll be fascinating. Why would anyone want to celebrate the day they died, said Ron. Sounds dead depressing to me. Harry was at the point of telling Ron and Hermione about Filch in the Quickspell course when a salamander suddenly whizzed into the air, emitting loud sparks and bangs as it whirled wildly around the room. The sight of Percy bellowing himself hoarse at Fred and George, the spectacular display of tangerine stars showering from the salamander's mouth, and its escape into the fire, with accompanying explosions, drove Filch and the Quickspell envelope from Harry's mind. By the time Halloween arrived, Harry was regretting his rash promise to go to the Death Day party. A promise is a promise, Hermione reminded Harry bossily. You said you'd go to the Death Day party. So at 7 o'clock, Harry, Ron, and Hermione walked straight past the doorway to the packed great hall, which was glittering invitingly with gold plates and candles, and directed their steps instead towards the dungeon. The passageway leading to Nearly Headless Nick's party had been lined with candles too, though the effect was far from cheerful. These were long, thin, jet-black tapers, all burning bright blue, casting a dim, ghostly light even over their own faces. The temperature dropped with every step they took. As Harry shivered and drew his robes tightly around him, he heard what sounded like 1,000 fingernails scraping an enormous blackboard. Is that supposed to be music? Ron whispered. They turned a corner and saw Nearly Headless Nick standing in a doorway. My dear friends, welcome, welcome. So pleased you could come. It was an incredible sight. The dungeon was full of hundreds of pearly white translucent people, mostly drifting around a crowded dance floor, waltzing to the dreadful, quavering sound of 30 musical saws. Shall we have a look around? Harry suggested. Oh no, said Hermione. Turn back, I don't want to talk to Moaning Myrtle. Who? She haunts one of the toilets in the girls' bathroom on the first floor. She haunts a toilet? Yes, it's been out of order all year because she keeps having tantrums and flooding the place. I never went in there anyway if I could avoid it. It's awful trying to have a pee with her wailing at you. Look, food, said Ron. On the other side of the dungeon was a long table, also covered in black velvet. They approached it eagerly, but next moment had stopped in their tracks, horrified. The smell was quite disgusting. Large, rotted fish. Cakes, burned charcoal black, were heaped on slabs. There was a great maggoty haggis, a slab of cheese covered in mold, and an enormous gray cake in the shape of a tombstone, reading, Sir Nicholas de Mimsy Porpington, died 31st October, 1492. Harry watched amazed as a portly ghost approached the table, crouched low and walked through it, his mouth held wide so it passed through one of the sinking salmon. Can you taste it if you walk through it? Harry asked. Almost, said the ghost sadly as he drifted away. I expect they'd let it rot to give it a stronger flavor, said Hermione. Can we move? I feel sick, said Ron. Just then they saw Myrtle gliding over. The squad of the ghost is a girl. She had the glummest face Harry had ever seen, half hidden behind lank hair and thick, pearly spectacles. "What?" she said. "How are you, Myrtle?" said Hermione. "It's nice to see you out of the toilet." Myrtle sniffled. "Miss Granger was just talking about you," said Peeves. "Just saying how nice you look tonight," said Hermione. Myrtle eyed Hermione suspiciously. "You're making fun of me," she said, silver tears welling rapidly in her small, see-through eyes. "No, honestly, didn't I just say how nice Myrtle's looking?" said Hermione, nudging Harry and Ron painfully in the ribs. "Oh, yeah, she did." "Don't lie to me," Myrtle gasped, tears now flooding down her face, while Peeves chuckled happily over her shoulder. "Do you think I don't know what people call me behind my back? Fat Myrtle, ugly Myrtle, miserable, moaning, moping Myrtle!" "Oh, dear," said Hermione. Nearly Headless Nick now drifted towards them through the crowd. "Enjoying yourselves?" "Oh, yes," they lied. "Oh, here we go," Nearly Headless Nick said bitterly. Through the dungeon wall burst a dozen ghost horses, each ridden by a headless horseman. The assembly clapped wildly. Harry started to clap too, but stopped quickly at the sight of Nick's face. The horses galloped into the middle of the dance floor and halted, rearing and plunging. At the front of the pack was a large ghost who held his bearded head under his arms, from which position he was blowing the horn. The ghost leapt down, lifted his head high in the air so he could see over the crowd. "Nick, how are you? Head still hanging in there?" He gave a hearty guffaw and clapped Nearly Headless Nick on the shoulder. "Welcome, Patrick," said Nick. "Livens," said Sir Patrick. "Very amusing." "Don't mind Nick," shouted Sir Patrick's head from the floor. "Still upset we don't let him join the hunt. But I mean to say, look at the fellow." "I think," said Harry, "Nick's frightening, very frightening, and, ha!" yelled Sir Patrick's head. "Betty asked you to say that. If I could have everyone's attention, it's time for my speech," said Nearly Headless Nick loudly, striding towards the podium and climbing into an icy blue spotlight. "My late lamented ladies and gentlemen, it is my great sorrow." But nobody heard much more. Sir Patrick and the rest of the Headless Hunt had just started a game of head hockey, and the crowd was turning to watch. Nearly Headless Nick tried vainly to recapture his audience, but gave up as Sir Patrick's head went sailing past him to loud cheers. Harry was very cold by now, not to mention hungry. "I can't stand much more of this," Ron muttered. "Let's go," Harry agreed. And then Harry heard it. "Rip, tear." It was the same voice, the same cold, murderous voice he had heard in Lockhart's office. "Harry, what are you—" It's that voice again. "Shut up a minute." "So hungry for so long." "Listen," said Harry. The voice was growing fainter. Harry was sure it was moving away, moving upward. A mixture of fear and excitement gripped him as he stared at the dark ceiling. How could it be moving upward? Was it a ghost? "This way," he shouted. "Harry, what are we—" "Shh!" Harry strained his ears distantly from the floor above, and growing fainter still, he heard the voice. "I smell blood. I smell blood. It's gonna kill someone," he shouted, and ignored Ron and Hermione's bewildered faces. He ran up the next flight of stairs, 3 at a time, trying to listen over his own pounding footsteps. Harry hurtled around the whole of the second floor, Ron and Hermione panting behind him, not stopping until they turned a corner into the last deserted passage. "Harry, what was that all about?" said Ron. "I couldn't hear anything." But Hermione gave a loud gasp. "Look!" Something was shining on the wall ahead. Foot-high words had been daubed on the wall between 2 windows. "The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware." "What's that thing hanging underneath?" said Ron. As they edged nearer, Harry almost slipped. There was a large puddle of water on the floor. Mrs. Norris, the caretaker's cat, was hanging by her tail from the torch bracket. She was stiff as a board, her eyes wide and staring. For a few seconds, they didn't move. Then Ron said, "Let's get out of here." "Trust me, we don't want to be found here," Ron said. But it was too late. A rumble, as though of distant thunder, told them the feast had just ended. From either end of the corridor where they stood came the sound of hundreds of feet climbing the stairs, and the loud, happy talk of well-fed people. Students were crashing into the passage from both ends. The chatter, the bustle, the noise died suddenly as the people in front of the people spotted the hanging cat. Harry, Ron, and Hermione stood alone in the middle of the corridor as silence fell along the mass of students pressing forward. Then someone shouted through the quiet, "Enemies of the air, beware! You'll be next, mudbloods!" It was Draco Malfoy. He had pushed to the front of the crowd, his cold eyes alive, his usually bloodless face flushed, as he grinned at the sight of the hanging, immobile cat.